Welcome, everyone.
Okay, so welcome, everyone,
to the Molchanovs Movement. Today we have Matt, who is now in Mexico, and he will explain to you all the basics about underwater photography when you're a freediver. And I'm super excited because he's an amazing freediver and photographer, and he will share with us some of his beautiful pictures in the cenotes in Mexico.
Thank you, Alisa. So yeah, welcome everyone. Today's topic is underwater photography. I will start the topic more into like how to get into underwater photography, what kind of skills you need to do it while freediving, because it's a bit special. And then I'm gonna open for any question you would have. We're gonna cover like gear for like camera, gear in terms of freediver, and then some safety aspects that are very important for freediving and underwater photography. If you have like very specific question, or if you're already like an advanced photographer, feel free to reach me maybe a bit later for very specific question if you want, if you don't have your answer like in this webinar, but I will try my best to cover many aspects. Okay, so who I am Matthieu Duvault. I am living in Tulum in Mexico, and I do three things in life. I love to do freediving like most of you. I am teaching freediving. I am instructor trainer for Molchanovs Freediving that I support a lot because I really love the program and the way they see freediving and they make it change. I do competition because I love to go deep as well. So that's competition specifically. I am national record for Canada for bifins, and I'm trying to make my way for the monofin as well in a couple of years, hopefully. And then I do underwater photography. I love underwater photography. It's definitely how to say, it's like my my breath. Sometime when I'm like a bit tired of the other aspect of freediving, I just take my camera and I just have fun, and I can also like create and give more like artistic side to what I do, and I really like this. So maybe you know already some of my pictures. I'm quite active on social media. You can find me mainly on Instagram at Matt Freediver or Cenote Freediving, like this, which is the school I have here. All right. First, I would like to know if some of you are already doing underwater photography, or if you are all beginners, or basically what is your level. Maybe we could do, I don't know if we can do like a little poll or just a raise hand if you already do photography, or if you're just interested in the subject. Alisa, maybe you can.
Yeah, it's the easiest. Yeah, it's the easiest if you can just raise your hands, everyone, or if you just write in the chat. So we have Tim. He's a beginner level in underwater photography, and then we have 3 people that raise their hands. So assuming that they are doing some photography, and Sophie's a beginner.
Okay. And as well, are you all certified freediver, or are you just interested in freediving and completely beginners or not?
So we have wave 2, okay. Instructor.
So,
and let me check Facebook if we have any comments here.
Last one, instructor, very nice. Freediver and enjoy taking video and photo, certified freediver, underwater photography. Okay. Okay, very interesting. So mainly people that are already in the water, and I guess most of you have ever like already touched the camera or play with it. So to start, I'm gonna show you a little bit of 3. Okay. I'm gonna show you like 3 different setups, and that were also my progression. Now I'm shooting with mirrorless, which is like very good. I'm very happy with that. But I started like almost everyone with an action cam. So the original underwater photography starting kit, let's say, will be a GoPro or like a Sony action cam or something like this. Most people have one, and you can already do like really cool stuff with that. Here I have a GoPro 8 and then an underwater case because the GoPro is waterproof, but just to 5, 8 meter, I will say. They say that it's 10, but good luck to take it to 10 meter. The case is rated for 40 or 60 meter, depending of which case, which is more than enough for most of the work we're gonna do. What's cool with the GoPro is that now you have what we call the Pro Tune, so you will be able to change the parameter and to be able to use it almost like a manual compact camera in a way. Not really, but at least you can decide which ISO you want to put, which no, maybe not aperture if I remember. No, ISO, shutter, white balance, stuff like this. So you can play with it. The new thing about GoPro since a couple of years is that now you can shoot in a RAW. RAW is a non-compressed type of picture. That means that all information that the sensor had when it took the picture will be in the file. So it's not compressed. That means that you can have access to some information you will not be able to see maybe on the picture when you just look at it. And I'm talking here mainly about color, because as you can notice, as you know, I guess, the deeper you go, the less color you have, because the spectrum disappears little by little. In the first 5 meters, we lose the red, and then orange, and yellow, and then blue, green, and then blue. So that's very important. So GoPro for this is quite cool. It's quite cheap, and it's a good way to start a little bit to do some photography. After that, I will show you when I will share my screen some picture I did with a GoPro in some cenotes, because this is where I dive most of the time, and you can see you can do some really cool stuff. Of course, you don't have like the flexibility of a complete camera, and when it's time for printing, it's maybe not the best, but you can do very good things, at least to play if you're on a budget. All right, second one, that was my second setup I got. It's something like this. This is an underwater housing. This one from Canon, and inside, a little compact camera. So this is quite affordable. The case is not very expensive, so I don't know, it depends on the brand and all, but this one, maybe the case was like $300 or $400, and the camera maybe $300 or $400. So we are not in $1,000 like bills. What's the point of this little camera like that? Is that you can use it in manual, so you can have fun, you can really put the setting you want. The quality is quite good. It's very impressive what you can do with such a small camera. It shoots RAW. In terms of brands, the most famous one, I think, is the Sony RX100. You have Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4, maybe Mark 5, I don't remember, but there's a lot of Mark. And you can have like a setup with a decent price. One of the problem of that, for me, it was the depth, how wide was the lens, because you cannot like add a wide angle lens. So for this, you can simply buy what we call a wet lens, something like this. This one is from Canon. It's something you're gonna put on your case, and like the name says, so wet lens have water in between your case and the lens, so you need to put it in the water, and this will give you an effect. It will just widen your field. Yeah. So maybe it even works if I put it in front of the camera to give you an idea. Okay, you see, without and with, much better, but a lot of aberration and problem we can see because it's made to work in the water. So a lens like this, it's not cheap. Underwater photography is not cheap, unfortunately, but it's really cool. It's about roughly $500 again. To buy it, you can have a lot of second hand, but you need to be very careful because you need to have the right adapter on your case. So here I add another one because my case was not made for that. So I have a tray here, and this piece of metal is something I added in when I got the lens. You need to be careful that it's gonna work with your camera because you might have some problem that we call vignetting. So that means that in the corner of the image, you will have some black space. It's something that is a bit annoying, and then you need to edit it in post-production to crop or to manage to fill this black with something. So that's heavy post-production, let's say. And also you want to check that it's wide enough and that it's going to work with your camera. So for this, feel free to check directly the manufacturer like specification and ask some maybe some underwater photography shop that people that try actually the lens in the water and tell you like if it works or not. Right now, one of the most famous wet lens for wide angle is from Nauticam. Nauticam is a very famous brand for underwater housing. They do amazing housing, like I guess the best in the world or close to it. It's quite expensive, but they're also like doing some very high quality product in terms of lens, and they have a wet lens that is very, very good. I have a friend using it, and it's quite amazing. So even if you have like a compact camera in a Nauticam case with this lens, you're gonna have like some very sharp and very nice results. Okay, so that was my my second setup. I got this for years with a lot of frustration because sometimes I aim to do like more than the camera is capable to give me. It's a very small sensor. It's very noisy when you boost a bit the ISO. It's a bit difficult to work on, but when you understand it, when you have enough experience, you can do some really, really cool stuff. You can check my Instagram, everything that is, let's say, before December this year, it's gonna be on this little camera, which this one, by the way, is a Canon. It's S120 is the model. It's discontinued, but it was a very good one. One of the points of this camera, why I choose it back in the days, is because first of the price, and also because the lens got a minimum aperture number of 1.8. That means that it can open very wide to let a lot of light go inside. So this is for me critical, especially because I'm shooting mainly in very, very dark places like cenotes, where the contrast of light is very high. For me, it was great. So the bigger your aperture, the bigger the hole, okay? The more light comes in, and then the smaller is the number. So f1.8, it's a very wide aperture. If you go to f22, for example, it will be a very narrow aperture. So it's what you're gonna use, for example, in bright sun outside where you have too much light going into your sensor. Yeah. Okay, so that's for the part 2. And then after that, because I love underwater photography and because I am a freediving instructor and competitor, I'm broke like most of you. I took a lot of time to buy a proper camera, and I wanted to make the right choice. So I checked what makes sense in terms of budget if I want to keep competing this year and having a life, and what will give me the most pleasure and not too much frustration. So many people ask me what I use now because they can see, I guess, like quite an upgrade in the picture I do, and of course it's linked with the skills, but also with the camera. I will not lie, a good camera will help a lot. I'm using that. This is a Sony A7 II, not the R2, but the 2. This is the one I use. I think it's a very good compromise between price, functionality, portability, and everything. I'm very, very happy with it. Yes, if I had a bit more budget, I would have been for a version 3, but that was almost double price, so no. Now, in terms of, this is the body. what is very important for underwater photography, it's going to be the lens. So my body is a mirrorless. That means that in the professional range camera, you have two family. You have DSLR and you have mirrorless. The mirrorless, like the name say, it's basically a camera without a mirror. That means that the light will enter directly through the lens and directly on the sensor. You don't have a mirror that will reflect the light to the sensor. There's some advantage on mirrorless. It's generally a bit cheaper. Yes, Sony Alpha A7 II. Yes, that's what I said. So it's a bit cheaper for mirrorless. It's much more compact, so that's really cool. But there's some inconvenience as well. The battery life is not that good. It's sometimes a bit slow, even though it's getting better and better. Like I think Sony is releasing right now, or very soon, the A7 IV. I'm really interested to see what it is. A little bit, many people ask what is the difference between Sony A7 and A7R. So we have A7 II, for example, and A7R2. The R is just a version on steroid, let's say, with the main difference is that the file you can produce with an R version are much bigger. So you have much more pixel basically in your picture. That means that you can theoretically like print like huge print and crop much better in the image. The downside is that you need a lot of power to process the files, to store the files, which again is not my case. This is why I went for the normal version, because I do most of my work on an iPad and on little USB dongle and external hard drive, and it's not that simple, especially for storage and also for processing power. Although now with the new version of iPad Pro, you have an incredible tool for editing picture. It's so good. I hope to buy one someday. Okay. Now about the lens. I personally do most of underwater photography that I'm going to do. It's going to be wide angle. So what's important for me is to work on wide angle. I do mostly freediving photography with people, or just with like underwater landscape, let's say. And I will seek for a lens that will be the widest possible, with the most, the brightest possible, with the more light coming in, and with autofocus. That's very important for me as well. So for this, I choose a lens which is Samyang or Rokinon. It's two brands are exactly the same. Just one is sold, I think Rokinon is in the US and Samyang in the rest of the world. 14 millimeter, that means that it's quite wide, and f2.8, so it's quite bright as well with autofocus. I'm very happy with it so far. Basically at f2.8 you have quite a lot of distortion in the corner, so you need to keep your subject more in the middle if you want to have something like very crisp and very nice. But overall I'm quite happy with it. What else with lens? Yeah, lens, it's very important for your setup. The body is great, yeah, but the lens is really what will make like the most difference, I would say. So feel free to try some lens, to see some reviews, and to find the one that fits for you. There's better than this one. There's also worse. Really depends. What I'm talking about today is more like natural light underwater photography. I used to do a little bit of work on strobes, which mean flash, you know, like. And with external lights, I did a bit of macro photography when I was scuba diver. It's fun and all, but here is not really the topic. I'm talking about more like freediving photography, and for that we are generally with natural light and wide angle. Okay. Oops, sorry, I have one thing. All right. Now the big question is, what kind of housing do you use? I have this all the time, and housing is the problem. So underwater housing, it's super expensive. So if your camera is, for example, $2,000 to $3,000 for like a mirrorless plus lens, something like I have, or even better, or even more expensive, the case, the housing is generally as expensive as the total setup, even more sometimes. So the most famous brand are Nauticam. They are doing metal, aluminum underwater housing, and Ikelite, they are doing polycarbonate underwater housing. What's the main difference in those is that one will be stronger. Like honestly, Nauticam, I haven't seen anyone like really breaking it. I've seen some like falling on the floor and having some bump, but they all made it. It's quite good. You need to take care of it, of course. But I think if you're like hardcore photographer, if you travel a lot, if you have a bit of budget, it's the way to go. Sorry, just a second. I have a bit of wind starting to kick in. Yeah, it's the way to go. You have also Aquatica. Aquatica, same concept. It's aluminum case from Canada. Those one, really good quality. I haven't worked with it, but I heard really good things. Then Ikelite is the most famous for polycarbonate. That means it's plastic. It's very thick plastic. It used to be known to break a lot and to have a lot of leak and problem. Now it's apparently much better. I have also some friends having the new generation of Ikelite, and so far they are very happy. The thing with Ikelite and polycarbonate case compared to Nauticam or to aluminum, let's say, is that it's going to float much more. So we're going to cover this a bit later. The weighting of your camera is quite important as well. So it's going to be a bit more difficult to bring a close to neutral buoyancy to your setup with like a polycarbonate setup than with aluminum, because aluminum will be heavier. So we have a lot of brands also doing housing. And something that is really cool right now is that we have also some low cost options. And not many people know it. Most people think I'm diving with Nauticam, but I cannot afford it. Or maybe not this year, maybe one day. I would love to have one, but I cannot. So I took a chance and I went for another option. I'm sure you know about it because it started to be quite famous. It's something coming from China. It's called Sea Frog or Macon. And this is what I use for my camera. So I use this new generation case for the Sony A7 II, and I put a big dome on it, and I managed to find a way to find a lens that will fit in it, because information is almost none on the website. They are not really, they don't try much things, so you need to take a chance. That's what I did, and I was very lucky, and it worked. So this kind of housing will be less than $1,000, which is much better than 5,000 or 6,000, especially when you consider the dome. Now, what's the problem? The problem is that it's not that reliable. So far, I never had any problem. I'm very happy, and some people as well. But I know that one day it's gonna fail. So you need to be prepared for it. Like I would say, like every housing, maybe it will be a human error or it will be a defect or whatever. But at one point, it's gonna fail. So you need to be prepared when you do underwater photography to lose your gear possibly. So we still have like a lot of tools to help us to stay safe, and we are lucky in freediving because if there is a problem, if the alarm ring inside the case to say like, oh, there's water inside, you can sprint up and take your camera dry. But which is not really the case for scuba diving, where you still need to do your decompression. Well, I really have a problem with wind. I'm sorry. Okay, hopefully it's going to be better. So yeah, it's something that is cool in freediving. If you have a problem, you can go up and you can maybe save your camera. If you have water coming to your case, the first reflex will be to take your case and to put it like this. So then the dome will start to fill up with water, and your camera, your body at least, will be possibly safe and not flooded the time you go up. But I hope it's not gonna happen. So yeah, what about this case? It's polycarbonate, but the way it's made, it's quite small, so it's super easy to carry around. How I use it, I simply put my camera in. I have some handle like that. That I'm gonna screw. Let's see. Okay, and then you end up with something like this. Okay, which is quite nice. I have a little lanyard on the side to clip it to my belt or to my wrist, depending. And then what I do, I will cover that later. It's in terms of weight, I will add a little neck weight on the back to be able to make it a little bit less buoyant. But personally, I like to have my camera slightly buoyant and not negatively buoyant, because if I drop it or if something happens, I know it's going to be going up to the surface. And sometimes also in cenote, because it's a closed space, I just leave it free. I go to check something, I dive or what, the camera is just floating around, and then I take it and I go down. So that's quite useful. You definitely don't do that in the open ocean. You don't want your camera to go away. I've seen some very scary video of underwater photographer in the open ocean taking their camera slightly negatively buoyant, so sinking slowly, and then just leaving it going away for like maybe 10, 15 meters, and then diving to grab it. So it's very cool for the effect, but I would definitely not do that. Imagine your ears are not equalizing or something. Oh my God. So yeah, that's basically what I use in terms of gear. So to recap, I will be happy to answer some question after, but to recap, starting with something like a GoPro or what, it's very easy. It's not expensive. You can start to experiment, to see a bit of how to frame your image and the speed and the angle and many things. You can have a lot of fun. You can start to edit your picture, and you can still have some information in it. After that, maybe try to reach for something like a compact camera with a case. Can be like polycarbonate case, quite cheap, or even like a Nauticam case. For example, Sony RX100 or like some Canon compact. Check the specification to be sure that it's working for what you want to do. What is cool with the compact is that you don't really need a lens, for example, to do macro photography. Most of them, they are really good to go very close to a subject, to something, and take, for example, an amazing picture of a shrimp. So that will be a nice middle price range to start underwater photography and to start to have a lot of fun. And then if you really decided, I suggest you to go at one point, yeah, to crack the wallet and to go for something you can afford. Don't put yourself in trouble, of course, because most of the gear you're gonna buy, you're not gonna make it in terms of money. Like, it's more like money out and not much in. Even if you're good and even if you can market yourself well, I don't know many people that are really living and making profit from underwater photography. It's possible, but it's very difficult. And at that point, yeah, choose depending of what you like, what you want to do. So more or less, DSLR, you can see a lot of comparison on internet, like YouTube video or whatever. Ask some friend underwater photographer what they use and why, and yeah, and make your way into that. Underwater photography is amazing because I think it's one of the reasons freediving right now is so popular. It's not the only reason, but it was a way to show a different aspect of freediving, something that is dreamy, that is beautiful. And I'm not talking just about like girls in bikini. I'm talking about the general artistic world that we can have. We have extremely talented photographers around and videographers that are doing some really cool stuff. And I'm really glad for that. This is also one of the reasons I'm doing it, and I'm doing it in Cenotes. It's to show a little bit what it is, and to add a little bit of a dream layer on the underwater photography. So yeah, it's really cool, and I think it's gonna keep improving, and we can see more and more talented people all around. It's really interesting. I have here like many photographers coming for like discovering the cenotes and taking picture, but you have so many places in the world where you can do incredible stuff, and sometimes you don't think about it. You're like, oh shit, I'm just diving in this area or this area, and it's not that great. But if you're a bit smart and you have a bit of an idea, you can do some really amazing things. You can just check some picture of Dan Verhoeven in simply in a pool, or like you don't need to be. I mean, you don't need to be in Bahamas to have like really great picture. You can do really interesting stuff. So yeah, that's really cool. Okay. One little thing about gear that I just forget is just to talk a little bit about the parts that you have in housing that will be for a mirrorless or for DSLR. So you have the housing in itself, and then you have the dome. For wide angle photography, we use a dome to be able to see wide, and to be able to do also split photography. Split photography is when you have a half of the image that will be dry and the other half that will be water. That's really cool. It's not easy to do, but basically the bigger the dome, the most easy it will become to do nice split photography. And also because the level of the water will be far away from your lens. So the further it is, the thinner it will look in the picture. So that will be useful. In general, personally, I like to go with bigger dome, but the price to pay is that first it's more expensive, and second you will have much more air inside. That means that your whole setup will be floating more. You have more possibility to have fog as well because you have more air inside, and it's more easy to scratch. If you want to do split photography, so half, a lens like this, like a wet lens, like I showed you for my intermediate setup, it's not gonna work. Or you can manage, I did few, but it's very difficult. Why? Because the water will be on both parts of the lens. So it's not like you push the water out and you have a line of the water. The water will be very close to your lens, also inside the lens, I mean, on the other side. So this is absolutely not the kind of setup you want to do that. At this time, I think if you're like super budget and you will do split, the best will be to take GoPro and to just buy like a dome. It's something that is cheap and you can do really good results with this, and it's gonna be it's gonna be sharp on both sides, which is not always simple to do depending of the light you have. Yeah. Then for your dome, you have a part that is called a port. So this is a port. It's a piece that will go in between your dome and your housing to just extend the size of this part, because your lens might be too big, too long to fit in your dome, basically. So you need to be careful when you order something to take the right port for the right lens. Some lenses are very long, some are very small. Me, I'm very, very lucky because I managed to put my dome directly on the case without any port. So it's directly attached, and it was the only way that I was fitting the setup properly for the lens I have. But the lens is very close to the edge of my dome. And it works really well, but it was a chance I took. So I had a possible outcome of that would be like, oh, it just doesn't work. Just because this brand of housing doesn't give like much detail about what fits and how you need to try. To show you another thing, this is another port, but this time with a flat port, like we say. like this. So this will be more useful. For example, if I put something like a 30 millimeter, 50 millimeter, something like this, where I don't really need to be that wide like a normal dome. And I will definitely not go for split shot for that. It's more like this kind of portrait stuff. I personally don't play much with this kind of lens underwater, but maybe I will. I think you can do some good stuff. And it's another way to be creative and to try some new things. Just to show you a bit some parts. All right. Last thing about gear, it's about strobes and lights. So like I said, I'm not using it, so I'm not gonna talk much about it. But in general, when you want to use external lights, you will have your tray with your handle, and then here you're gonna put some arm with a strobe there, and generally another one on the other side. So you will be able to have a subject with light without having shadows, because if you're just on one side, it's gonna create shadows. And you can do the same for external light, but that will be another topic. And because I'm not using it daily, I don't think I'm qualified to talk about that. But it's something to try as well.
Matt, someone is asking why you are not using strobes.
Because honestly, I don't like, for what I do, which is mostly people, if I was, for example, shooting like sharks in the Bahamas or what, I want to take a shot like this and have the shark going there, I will definitely try to use some kind of light or strobes to have a nice finish and a nice texture and a nice color on the skin of the animal or these kind of things. But for what I do in the environment I am, like in the cenotes, with like generally we play with the rays of light, the darkness, and then the natural light painting a bit of the wetsuit or the skin of the freediver. I feel that strobes, most of the time it gives like a very fake finish, and I just don't like it. I don't like to work with that. I think it doesn't look that great. When I tried, for example, in the same picture, like with strobes or no strobes, I really prefer like without. But I like to use lights, like a torch, yeah, to play in the picture. For example, lighting a stalactite or a stalagmite in the water, these kind of things, that could be very cool. But generally, I prefer to have the subject, the model, to hold the light, and then we play with that. Also, I've seen some picture really cool from Kurt Chambers in Hawaii, playing with the cube. It's a little cube with a lot of LED around. It's super bright, and that gives like a very cool possibility. Like I remember this picture, a girl holding the cube like this, and it looked like, I don't know, like something almost magical. It's very nice. So definitely playing with this kind of things, but not. I don't really like, for my type of photography, I don't really like the finish of a strobe. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then we have a few questions about what camera mode you use and on the white balance, for instance. But I'm sure you're going to talk about your settings in a while.
Yeah. Yes, I will talk about settings. I will just keep going on gear, but this time explaining a bit of the freediving gear. Okay, before. Sounds good? Okay. So to do underwater photography, in terms of gear, what you want your normal freediving gear, but there's some little specificities. So first, your mask. You want to be able to see something. So you want a mask that will not fog all the time. That is just horrible. When you're underwater and you're always like struggling with fog, it's a big problem. So try to spit in it when it's dry, and leave the spit for like maybe a minute or two, and then rinse it, and then try how it goes. Or maybe try to find a mask that doesn't fog that much. Burn it, do whatever you want to do to make it, but this is very important. Second, you need a mask also that is not too small. We will be looking for very low volume mask in terms of deep free diving, for sure, because we don't want to put too much air in the mask for equalization. But in freediving photography world, it's not like we're going very deep, so it's better to have a bit more space and to see a little bit better. So you will be more aware of your environment, I mean, to not like crash into a boat or into a wall if you're in a cenote or a stalactite, and also to see properly what's happening in your camera. So mask is very important. Fins, I would say that long fins, like for example, the plus version of some brands or stuff like this, it's quite annoying because very often you will end up being in this position with your legs like this, your camera like that, because you just change the side you were in the water, you just like twist, and then you have the tips of your fins because you're shooting very wide inside the shot, and that's not really nice. So I would say like the fins that are not too long are a bit better. In terms of stiffness and all, it's up to you. Personally, I dive with very soft fins. Lately, I've been diving all my dive with the new Molchanovs CB2, and one thing I like about them, among others, is that they are a bit shorter than the fins I was using before, which means that less often I have my fins in the shot. Even the Molchanovs shorties, the very short fins, the carbon one will be like super great. Alex, if you look at me, I want one. I want one pair. That would be very good. I think for underwater photographer, it's really nice to have like this kind of powerful but yet like short fins to be able to move more easily in the water, to turn easily. It's not the same thing as deep freediving for sure. So that would be interesting. Lanyards, but not lanyard to clip on the line, lanyard to clip on your camera, like that. Okay. Can be like many type. You can actually take a real lanyard and make a way to attach it to your tray, or use like this this kind of things. And me, I have a little carabiner here that I attach to my belt or to my wrist or something like this. Why? Because you don't know what can happen, and if your camera is a few $1,000s, you don't want to let it sink somewhere. That's for sure. So you prefer to have it attached to you. Last thing, weighting. So it's very, very important the way you're going to weight yourself in the water. If you're very, very shallow, like for example, you're shooting pool or stuff like this, you want to be neutral where you're going to shoot, because the danger is not that high. It's not like you're going to sink like very, very deep. And it's going to help you much better to have a good way to be stable underwater. So for that, you use neck weight, you use weight belts, it's up to you, but also remember that your camera needs to be weighted often. So you have two possibilities in your camera. Either it's naturally sinking, so then you will have to use some floater, which will be generally attached to the arm here. You will have some tube of carbon often with air inside, so they will not compress with that, and that will change the buoyancy of your whole setup to make it either neutral or slightly negative or slightly positive. You don't want to be hugely negative and you don't want to be hugely positive. That's going to be very difficult to dive like that. Or the second possibility, and this is the case when you use polycarbonate case often, or always, let's say, it's going to be very positive. So in this case, you need to work on the weighting of your setup. So your setup will be, the buoyancy will depend of the volume of air you have in your case. So if you have a huge dome, if you have a huge case or a small case, it's going to change. And the weight of your camera. So here, for example, my camera is not big, but quite heavy. And it's not that small compared to the case. I mean, it fits pretty well inside. I don't have that much air, so my setup is still buoyant, but not hugely buoyant. For the case I've seen from Ikelite, for example, that are polycarbonate as well, and for the same model, they float like much more because there's more air, because the case doesn't fit exactly the size and the shape of the camera, if you see what I mean.
And we have one question that fits to the subject. What do you think are the biggest challenges in underwater freediving?
That's coming just after.
Okay, and then how deep should we be neutral if we carry a camera like yours?
It really depends where you shoot. Again, so personally, I think a safe way will be to be neutral around 10 meters. But it depends where you shoot. If you plan to shoot all your shot at like 3 meters, being neutral at 10 meters, it's gonna be quite challenging to stay at the right place without like going up like really fast. So in this case, I would weight myself a bit more, okay, to be neutral closer to the surface, but never in a way that will compromise my safety. If you do like a deeper dive for your underwater shoot, like because your model is deeper, you definitely need to be careful. I will even like have more the tendency to underweight myself, to spend maybe a little bit more energy to get down, but maybe to put a rope to go, for example, if I need to go to 30 meters, maybe attach my camera to my wrist or to my belt, get down a bit underweighted, doing free immersion. Then down there, it's gonna be all right, and I will be negative for sure, so no risk. I will do my shot, etc. But after that, the way up is we go down with a setup like this or even bigger. It's absolutely another story than going down with a GoPro. It's not the same world. It's really exhausting. I can tell you, I do some. I train a lot freediving. I do diving. I really suffer sometimes on some dive with underwater photography. So you need to know your limits to have good skills, and weighting is very important. So I would say for a base, 8 to 10 meters will make sense. But again, not for a dive where you go to shoot at 30. Yeah. Most of the time you shoot around 5 or like this. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, also your weighting is important, but remember that you will have the camera in your hand. So the weighting of the camera is important. So like I said, like be sure that you put it close to neutral, that it's not gonna impact too much your weight, okay? And then it's a matter of choice. Some people want to have it exactly neutral. Some people want to have it slightly negative, and some people slightly positive. Like I said, I prefer to have it slightly positive because in terms of problem, I know it's gonna come up. Also because I often like take my camera around in cenotes and I leave it like floating around. And when I need to do a shot, I take it, I dive, I do my shot, and I drop it. So that's very convenient for me. All right, that's it for the gear. And now last part that I want to cover is safety and freediving skills. So I know that when you start freediving and maybe you start because you've seen some video of Guillaume Nery or this kind of incredible footage or super cool images. I have many people that I think they're doing an amazing job. And of course, this is like something you're like, oh, wow, I want to do that. It's so cool. And some of you, I know they will start freediving and they have like a good job and a wealthy life, you know, so they will be like, oh, let's go to buy an underwater camera straight away. That's the way. It's going to be cool. That's nice. I mean, if you can seriously do it, it's super cool. I wish I could do it before, and I really encourage people to do that. But remember that you need to be a good photographer. You will discover that it's super, super difficult to be relaxed, to be safe, to be aware of your environment, and to take good shots at the same time. And it's extremely easy to lose track of time, to completely forget where you are, what you do, to have huge contraction. And remember, when you're doing underwater photography like this, you most of the time absolutely not attached to anything. So if you black out, you're on your own. So this is something that I want to point out. In an ideal world, you want to always have a safety watching for you and a safety watching for your model if you are shooting with a person, because your life is also super important, and you will be the one that will spend the most oxygen and use the most oxygen during your dive, especially when you start, okay? It's really, really different to go to a deeper dive and to be completely relaxed, focused on your dive, or completely unfocused if you do the concentration, and then free fall, and then turn, and then go up, and you're in your own world, in your little bubble, and it's amazing feeling. But when you go to shoot, it's not the same story. You will be like completely aware of what's going on. Oh, I want to be like this or not like this. Oh, I have a reflection in my dome because of the sun. Oh, I need to change my ISO. I need to change my aperture. I need to change blah, blah, blah. And this is completely different. So really, really train and get a very comfortable freediver and be very safe in terms of what depth you should go to do your shot, and practice is very important. So your skills are very important, like how you fin, how you can relax, how you can equalize. It's something that you really need to work on to be able to be a successful photographer and also a safe photographer underwater. Orientation is very important. You know how it is when you go down without a line and it's not that right sometimes, especially in cenotes or even in the sea sometimes, you can easily lose orientation. So you're like, oh shit, where am I? And then you don't know really, and then you need to look around and you find like a point like, oh, that's my cue, I know where I am. This happens all the time with photography, so you need to be careful, and your model will be the same. Sometimes they go down with no mask or what, and they don't see anything. So you need to be very careful of the safety. If you're in the ocean, like be careful of the waves, the boat that could go, any kind of hazard and stuff that could make the experience unsafe. And if you are in cenotes, then it's super hardcore, I can tell you. You need to be absolutely careful about the wall of the cenote, the rocks, the roof. Most of the time, places where I shoot, because I love the beam of light, it's completely covered. And there's a hole, and we enter the hole, and then we go on the side, we shoot, and then we go back to the hole. So it's the worst situation possible because we are in the dark. We are not we are not attached to anything. And when you start to be slightly buoyant and take your pictures and then move a bit, and then suddenly you don't realize that you're getting faster and faster floating up. And it's very easy to be stuck then to hit your head, or to be stuck on the roof, and even to take a big stalactite in your face. I mean, it's stuff that happens, and you need to be very careful. You as a photographer, but also your model. You cannot take a beginner freediver and put it in this situation. That will be a mistake, and it would maybe end up well, but maybe end up really bad. So yeah, I wanted to just point that it's very important. I suggest you, before you go in the water with a model, when you have a new camera, do some session with a buddy, but without like shooting someone. Go down and imagine you're shooting and take care about your buoyancy. Can you manage it? Is it comfortable? Never push it to a point where you start to have huge contraction. Try to not exhale on your dive. I know it's very tempting sometimes to be just like dropping some bubbles to correct the buoyancy. I will not lie, I do it sometimes, but it's not ideal because you're gonna release some precious oxygen from your body, and especially if you're not very experienced, you don't know your limits. So all of this is very, very important. Remember also, when you dive for photography, you're gonna have a profile of diving that will be U-shape. It's not gonna be like a V, like you do for a normal dive, like you used to do for your training. So it's more like a spearfisher. So all the rules also of decompression sickness will apply, especially if you shoot deep. Generally, you don't shoot that deep, but remember, you need some time at the surface to relax, to release CO2, but also to release nitrogen. That's something that is important, and most people don't realize. If you do like 8 hours of photography, if by any miracle your camera can handle the battery, and you don't take much time at the surface, you can put yourself at risk. Same if you are a competitor, a competitive freediver like me, and you're in vacation somewhere doing a competition, and you're tempted to take your camera, but you just train as well. One will impact the other. Like if you want to be completely into your dive, you should not be on your camera. So often it's a problem because I want to shoot as well, but I want to dive. And then I will do like, oh, okay, I'm going to take my camera, I'm going to do my deep dive. Okay, I do my warm up, my deep dive, go up. Hopefully it's okay. And then, sorry, yeah, I will do my deep dive, and then I will be like, oh, let's take the camera and shoot the other people. And that's not a great idea because you're still like super saturated with nitrogen. So you don't want to do a repetition of dive like very fast to go to 10, 50 meters, take picture and go up. Think about all of this. This is something very important and it's for your safety. Always look up when you go up. Alisa, I hear some stuff in my AirPods. They might drop in terms of battery. So if you don't hear me anymore, you let me know, okay? Always look up when you go up in cenotes for very evident reason, but also in the sea, there can be anything on top of you. You have no idea. So in this case, look up and see where you go. Always try to have a safety. Someone to take care of you that will not be in your shot, but to be sure that you will make it safely. So it's great to be 4 people when you go for shooting. Your model, yourself, and then a safety that will be checking the model and a safety that will be checking yourself. And especially if you do some difficult shoots, I can think here for Cenote and Helita. It's the one that everybody knows here, the one with the sulfur layer at 30 meters. We've seen Dan Verhoeven there. We've seen Guillaume Nery. We've seen many people, Alexei Molchanov, diving in this cenote. It's a very cool place to train, but also for photography. But remember, it's 30 meters, it's deep. So you don't want to go down like this, feeling down with your camera, stay 2 minutes at the bottom to do your shot and go up without safety. That's for sure not. And if you black out at depth, you're going to sink below the sulfur layer. So it's going to be very difficult to find you because it's super dark below. So this is also like a very dangerous situation. When I have professional photographer coming here for doing this kind of shot, I definitely do safety. And I will not have my camera in my hand in this case, or I will have like another freediver doing safety, but that's absolutely mandatory. So think about this aspect, yeah? Know your limits, practice, and yeah, that's it. It's what I would say for the shooting part. In terms of setting in the water, so I can answer you some questions, and I will make it like my setting in a nutshell, okay? And then there will be one more aspect that is extremely important for underwater photography. It's editing, post-production, how to use Photoshop, Lightroom, or any software. I cannot cover that today because it's way too much. If you're interested to have another webinar about this, we can talk about it and I can make one and share my screen, but today I will not share it. So in terms of setting, what do you want? It depends of where you shoot. It depends of the luminosity you will have in the water and the depth. But let's start with the white balance. Let's start with the white balance. First, you need to shoot in RAW, RAW, RAW file. This is the way to have an uncompressed file when you take your picture to be able to retrieve information that are not really there when you just see the picture, okay? So what are this information? There's many things, but especially color correction and dark area, it's gonna make a huge difference. So even the GoPro right now can shoot in RAW, so shoot in RAW. Most of the compact cameras can as well, and of course mirrorless and DSLR. Then if you shoot RAW, you don't have to take care of your white balance. It doesn't matter. Just leave it on automatic. Some shot will look good, some shot not. It doesn't matter because you're gonna edit it afterward, okay? The information will be there anyway. So personally, I always leave it in automatic. Then what are the 3 different settings we have when we shoot? We have aperture. It's how much light can enter when you open. So aperture, the lowest number, which is the highest aperture, will be generally the way to go for dark places because you want to have more light. But the problem is that then you will have more, you have less depth of field. That means that the point where you will be focused, the distance in front and behind will be smaller in focus. So the more light enter, yes, but then you lose a little bit in terms of sharpness. So you need to see if you can afford to raise a little bit your aperture. Maybe your picture will look a little bit better, except if you use it specifically for an effect of sharp, like in focus and blurry. But it depends. For a lot of cases underwater, you will be in quite generally in low light conditions, so you don't want to have a very high aperture. When you want, I mean, very high number, f number, let's say, okay, aperture. When you want to do split shots, it's different because if you keep your aperture very wide, you're gonna have your focus that will be either on the upper part, on the lower part, but not both. This is why you have the water blurry and the land like sharp, or focus, I mean, or the contrary. For this, you will have, if you want to have both sharp, to change your aperture and maybe to put it to f8, f10, f12, even f16, and see how it goes for your lens and for your camera. But the result is that you will lose a little bit of light coming in. So you will have to maybe boost more your ISO. So aperture, it's important to play with it. Personally, I use most of the time very wide aperture, so very low number. My lens is capable to do 2.8. I use it most of the time at 2.8. And I would even try a bit less if I could. That's a choice. The back thing is that the corner will be also more distorted with this kind of aperture. Okay, next one is the shutter speed. The shutter speed is how long you're gonna open and close to let the light enter it. So in general, you want to keep it like low to be able to have light coming in, but not that low because then you're gonna be completely unfocused. If it's too high, it's gonna be super sharp and crisp, but at the same time, you will have much less light coming to your sensor. So it's also a problem. It depends on your situation. In general, I use shutter speed of 1/250. Minimum will be 160. It depends on how much crisp you want on the person you're shooting, for example, and how stable you are and how fast the subject is moving. The faster the subject is moving, the more you need to increase your shutter speed to be sharp. I never shoot, for example, at 8,000. Like that would be like completely. That would be a lot. I would have like so little light, it will not work. In terms of you and the subject, also you want to be as close as possible, but depending of your frame of what you want to produce as image. But remember that the furthest you are from your subject, the more water you are in between, and the more refraction and the less light will reach your camera, and the less good your picture will be in general, except if you are in very, very crystal clear water. That would be like ideal for sure. But if you have like water that is a bit murky or what, if you want to do a shot that you can use, generally, except if for another effect, generally you want to be close to your subject. So we have aperture, we have shutter speed, and then we have ISO. ISO is the sensitivity of your sensor. It's the equivalent of, in the argentic world, in the I don't know if this, the word in English is in French. What should be? Do you still hear me?
Now it's getting a bit worse.
Okay, I will switch to different.
All right, do you hear me? Yeah, okay. So yeah, sorry for this. So yeah, your ISO is the equivalent of when you had like an argentic camera and you are changing the film inside, they had different sensitivity. So this is the equivalent. What you want is that you want to use the lowest ISO, but that gives you like the sensitivity you want. So if you have a lot of light, you don't want to boost your ISO because the result will be a very noisy picture. And then it's going to be a lot of work to correct it in post-production, and it's never going to be the same as if you had like a low ISO. At the same time, if it's very dark and you put a very low ISO, so maybe 50, 60 or 100, it's going to be the voice is very difficult to hear. No, it's okay. Okay. If you go for like a very low ISO, it's going to be much cleaner. But the problem is that if you don't have much light, it's going to be very dark, and then you cannot always take it back in post-production. So you need to find the right amount, the right number of ISO to use depending on your situation. I generally, for me, because I have very high contrast between the dark and bright area in my pictures, I will manage to have the bright area where I want, or slightly overexposed, but not that much, and the rest will be quite dark, and then I will boost it when I do editing. If you do the contrary and you manage to have most of your image like nicely lit with a very high ISO, but the place where you have, for example, the beam of light completely overexposed is going to be there. Like it's very, very difficult to get back from that and to correct it.
So one question, Matt.
Yeah.
Do you use filters from Antonio?
If I use filters like in the water?
On the camera?
On the camera, never. I never use filter. I used to do when I had my first action cam, and I used like a red filter to shoot some video and stuff like this. And yes, it's working. But since I shoot now in RAW, there's absolutely no need for this. It's gonna, I mean, yes, it's gonna add a layer of red on your image, but the problem is that you will compromise a bit the light coming to your lens as well, because you put another layer or something, so you want to have the less possible. Okay, so yeah, for ISO, generally, what I use in the water, it's gonna be from 50, if I'm close to the surface, or if I'm in the light, up to, it depends, up to 3,000, 6,000 sometime. Sometime it's better to have like a very high ISO and to work a bit on noise reduction, and still it's gonna look like a bit almost like a painting, but it's gonna give an atmosphere, and it's gonna be nice to see. For example, the walls of the cenote or this kind of stuff. It can be interesting as well. It can be artistic as well to use high ISO. So yeah.
So we had that question, what's the biggest challenge in underwater photography?
Oh, there's a lot of challenge in underwater photography. I would say that the biggest one will be to be creative at one point, because many people are very good photographers. They already did a lot of things. And it's not easy. Sometimes you find a picture that you like. I will talk for myself. I'm like, oh, okay, I like to do this shot. And then when you did it like 10 times, then you're like, okay, I need to find something else. And sometimes by total accident, you're like, oh, wow, that was amazing. And then you try to recreate it. I would say like this aspect is not very simple, because at one point, everyone can have like the right camera, the right, try to find like the right setting and all, but it's how you will manage with your model if you use the model, or how you will interact with the animal if you use an animal. Use is not really a right word to use here, but to shoot an animal, you always be careful of the wildlife. Right? You don't exaggerate. and yeah, the difficulty will be to actually do an interesting shot. And the most challenge is to have a shot that almost tells a story. That will be like the next level. That's really cool. I personally started photography with a lot of inspiration from people. And yes, of course, I copied a lot of pictures that I've seen, because I was like, oh, that's very interesting. How do they do that? So I tried. and then I manage. Some I did like really good job and some not that much, but at least you learn. And then at one point you start to feel like, oh, okay, this is what I like to do. This is what I don't like. I feel a lot of connection for this kind of shot. And then you start to create your own specificity and style. And this is not easy. It will take some years. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then another question, what freediving level do you recommend people to start underwater photography?
I think if you're like a good wave 2, you start to have the knowledge and the control to start to do some underwater photography. But of course, it depends on people, and some people, you don't have to be deep freediver to be underwater photographer, that's for sure. But just you're gonna learn a lot. And in a wave 2 course, like going to maybe 25, 30 meter, you learn more about your buoyancy, you learn more about your kicking is better, you have much more experience in pool as well, you know what is a contraction, you have more relaxation in your dive, which is the very difficult points of underwater photography, is to get relaxed but focus at the same time and in control of your environment. It's a lot of things at the same time. So yeah, I would say wave 2, wave 3. I will not say like, oh, you're wave 1, you cannot have a camera. That's absolutely no. But if you do, you will understand when you will do a duck dive and you will not be able to get down or these kind of things. You'll be like, okay, maybe it's not the same, because yeah, you need to have more experience. But again, like repetition, work on it, go in a safe area, and take your case. Try to dive with it, and no stress, don't have people expecting from you to shoot them, because then you're going to be stressed underwater. You will be like, oh shit, I need to do this, and it doesn't work. No, just go with a friend or your buddy and say that you're not here really to take picture, but just to get used to your gear and start to dive like that. That's what I will do. Okay, that's cool. What I did with my first camera.
So I have 2 last questions for you. One is from Pierre. And he is wondering if it's necessary to have a dome underwater, because he was thinking that this is just for the like half and half pictures. And then the other one is from Jean. And he's asking if you're using those silicia bags to absorb the moist in the camera, and also if you treat your lens before diving somehow.
Okay, so first question is the dome. So if you shoot very wide, so yeah, one thing I didn't explain, in a mirrorless camera, you have 2 different types of sensor. You have what we call the crop sensor. It's a smaller sensor, and you have full frame. A7, like I use, is a full frame. So that means you're gonna be with the same width of lens, like 14 millimeter in my case. I'm gonna be much wider on a full frame than in a crop sensor. Crop sensor will be Sony A6000, for example. This is the reason I haven't buy that, because it was much less expensive. But then the result is your image will be a little bit smaller. So if you're very wide because you're on full frame, 14 millimeter, or even like a fisheye lens or whatever, without a dome, you're gonna have vignetting on the side. And this is the main why we use a dome as well, is because you want to be able to open the maximum possible to not have like things in the way, and to have like the full potential of your lens. Okay, so that's one of the main reason I would say, even if you don't do split photography. If some people think I'm wrong, because maybe there's a setup that works on a flat port, but there's no like huge flat dome, yeah, a flat port. So yeah, that's the way. Second question again, what was it?
If you're using those little like bags.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't, in this case so far, I haven't got any fog problem, because these little bags are made to absorb humidity, and this is good. I mean, use it. It's just I don't have with me, so I don't use it. But I'm very careful of how I assemble my setup. I do it with generally inside my house before I leave, and I will keep it in the shade. I will not put my camera in full sun. So I will try to minimize the problem I will have with fog. Also, I have a way, and some case have a way to vacuum, to pump air out of the case. So for example, here we have this vacuum pump system. You basically open it, it's a hole in your housing, and then you put a little vacuum tool. That will look, I will show you, I have it here. Something like this. You're gonna screw it, and then you're gonna open it. For example, in Nauticam housing, it's on the top of the case, and it's an option that comes with most cases because it's very important. It's to pressurize your case. So first you avoid a leak, then you have a little light that will lit on your valve to tell you if it's green, the pressure is still there, so there's no leak. And if it's red, the pressure changed, so that means that you have a leak. And then you will have this little pump like this to go and to take the air from the case. So what is the second effect of that on top of being much safer for your case? It's that the less air you have in your case, the less fog you're gonna have when you use it, which is great, okay? So if you have possibility to have this kind of valve, it will be in a professional case, I suggest it. The one from Seafrog, the one I have, is not that great because it's not made to be kept on the housing at all time. You're supposed to check your housing on dry and then remove it and then close again the little lock and then go in the water. So I tried to dive with it and I had like I had a little drop of water coming inside just the electric part, so nothing in the case, so it didn't fail really, but kind of. So now I dive without. I prefer to avoid, but in Icelite or in Aquatica or in Nauticam, it's an option that is very common, and that will help you to remove fog as well, if this is the main question. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And then very last question that Tim is asking, what's the maximum depth your dome has gone to? Because he experienced a GoPro dome that broke at 15 meters.
Yeah, you need to check the specification of the product you buy. GoPro, you know, it's not professional stuff. Like most of the product you're gonna buy for GoPro are gonna be from the consumer markets, stuff that are made for like Mr. and Mrs. everyone that are doing snorkeling and going to 3 meters and going up. So except if you go for a real brand that will sell you something like for 40 meters, 60 meters, 100 meters even, be very careful. Like for example, they rate their camera to 10 meters, but at 10 meters, it's impossible to use. The button gets pressed by the pressure. It's a big, it's horrible. Maybe you tried already, so definitely get a case. Yeah. For the dome of a GoPro, yeah, I'm not surprised. Also, remember, it's very, very important to clean your O-ring. So this O-ring here, it's very important to clean it, to keep it moist by putting some kind of oil on it, and to be sure when you close it that you don't have any sand, any hair. In my case, I don't have too much, so it's okay. But that's very important to avoid your system to leak. For GoPro, I didn't check lately, but I'm sure you can find something dome equivalent or what that can go like deeper than 10 meters. Need to check it. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt. Thanks everyone for listening and joining, and see you guys soon, hopefully for another session on the editing part. And don't forget to check out Matt's Instagram and Facebook page to see his amazing shots.
You know what? I will make a little video of a slideshow of pictures where I will just comment on it to say like, okay, this was done with a GoPro, this was done with my little camera, this was done with a professional setup, just for people to have an idea what you can do, and maybe to have like some before and after editing, just for them to have an idea of how it's supposed to look when you take your pictures.
Super cool.
And I will share it with you guys.
And
so
maybe you can add maybe you can add some of the settings Tim is asking on some of these pictures as an example, so people know.
Yeah, I can.
Cool.
I recommend you one. So yeah, just a little thing before we close it. Check on Facebook. You have a group that is called Wet Pixel Photography. It's a place where photographers put their picture. It's not a place to make advertising, so they don't try to sell you something, which is cool. It's just people to discuss about their picture, their setting. They put the camera, the lens, all setting during the picture and the story sometimes. That's very helpful. You can see some of my pictures that I posted there as well with some explanation. Also, yeah, if you want to see some of my stuff, check my Instagram or Facebook, and feel free to reach to me if you want, if you have some question or if you just want to say something. I wanted also to make a little shout out to a photographer that inspired me a lot. Everybody knows him, and he came here to dive in the cenote with me, and he's always there when I'm in the competition somehow. It's Dan Verhoeven. Man, you do an amazing job, and I would not do this kind of picture here now if I didn't meet you. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, I suggest everyone to check out what he's doing. It's quite amazing. Okay.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.